I will let our teacher introduce himself.
He's going to introduce himself before he does stuff.
Yep. So I just want to let everyone know, as I've been saying at the beginning of all these, please mute yourself. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat. And if you find JL in the chat windows, there is a pin so that you can make him the focus of your screen right now. All right. And with that, Jamie, feel free to take it ahead. Please introduce yourself.
All right. Well, my name is Jamie Lindell. I am Master Ulfgierr Ragnarsson in the FDA. What we're going to be doing today is forging out a self-handled knife. And let's see, do I turn this way? Is that better for everybody? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
that looks
great.
better. Yeah.
So we're going to be forging it out of this piece of this is 1080, and it is inch and a quarter by 6 inches by quarter inch. And so I'm just going to go ahead and toss that into the forge here. One of the things about knife making is having the right tongs to hold on to stuff is super important. Right? So you can see the tongs that I have a box on the top. So that way they're designed specifically to hold on to this shape of material. And since I'm clamped over the top and also it wraps inside, you're much less likely to have things go flying out of the tongs on you. And that's always a good thing to avoid when you're forging on stuff. The last thing you want to do is, have a hot knife fly around and hit you in the face, something like that. I'm going to get this set up to get a good view of my anvil here. Hands not covering the camera. Let's see here. How's that looking for everybody?
That looks good. That's good.
I'm working across here.
Yep.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. So this is the kind of knife that I'm going to be looking to make here, something similar to this. We have a lot of options as we go ahead and forge this out. But the first thing to do is to start forging the tip down. And now the way that we're going to do that is when you think about this as like a square end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this corner and I'm going to force this corner back into the material. So I'm going to start forging down here, making a flat that is then going to eventually extend down all the way to the bottom corner here. One thing that's going to happen as I'm doing that, as I forge here, this material is going to swell. And so what I want to make sure that I do always in your forging is you want to manage that material. And by manage it, I mean you want to make sure that you maintain the thickness here. So when you hammer here, not only does it push down, but it also swells out. And you want to make sure that that doesn't get away from you. It's really, really easy to let that material just expand as you're forging and forging and forging because you're looking at it in the profile and seeing all the progress that you're making, right? But you really need to make sure that you keep that material brought down to the correct, maybe not correct, but to the size of the material that you're working. Or what can happen is as it expands out, once you decide to start forging it down, those edges can fold over and you can create a cold shut, which wants to be avoided. And a cold shut is when you forge material down and basically create a self-imposed crack, basically, in the material. It's folded over onto itself. All right,
So Jamie, one quick question. And you may have already said it. What's the name of the style of tongs, and can they be purchased, or did you make them?
Oh, these were made here at the shop. So, I mean, I think they're referred to as box tongs because they have like the box on the bottom here. There might be some for sale on our Etsy page. I'm not sure, but I'm sure that you can find similar tongs out there.
Actually, Quick and Dirty tongs. He actually makes. I have a set of them. Makes a set of tongs like that for holding knife stock.
Nice.
I can post them as well.
Awesome.
But
all right,
buy them from Jamie if you can.
Material is hot here, and so we're going to come out and then we're going to just start we're going to start forging this corner down here, right? So, pushing that back, and you can see that I'm getting that kind of flare. I'm not sure how much you can tell there, but that material's flared out, so you want to go to the back, manage that material, and continue forging that back. Now, one thing that's happening now, as I'm forging this down, that material flares up. I bring it back down to the same thickness as the rest of the material. And what's happening here at the tip is I'm creating what we call fish mouth, right? Because as that material flared out, down, and I'm going to put this back in the fire, as I forged it down, what ends up happening is it's going to move in the path of least resistance, right? And the path of least resistance is out the front of the knife. So then you start creating that top lip of the fish mouth. All right, and you really want to avoid that and manage it if you start to get it, because what it's going to do is also then create a cold shut at the tip of your knife. So all of this is avoiding cold shut. So what I'm going to do, actually, in order to get rid of that, is I'm going to take that knife, I'm going to put it tip down, I'm going to have it rock back on that top lip of the fish mouth, and then hammer down on the back of the knife. And what that's going to do, actually, and what that's going to do is basically flatten that material out and push it back. And I'm going to kind of cheat it off at a bit of an angle so that I'm working towards that goal of creating that angle on the front of the knife, that tip. So here we go. So now that tip of the fish mouth, and just hammer that down. All right, and you see you got a little curve there. You just want to flatten that out. We always want to make sure that we are keeping our material, any of those spots that start to deform in ways that we don't want them to. You want to make sure that you're always managing that material back, so that way none of that stuff gets away from you and goes, too off the rails that it's going to be too much of a pain in the ass to fix later on. Because that's easy to have happen. And so now I basically have two angles going on, and I'm going to take the top kind of corner and start pushing that back again as well. So, let's wrap this. Now, one thing that's going to happen here, as I forge this down, is I'm going to start coming down to that bottom corner. And in order to work that bottom corner, if I keep it on my anvil here, I need to strike perfectly in order to forge that down to a point. But if I come to the edge, the base of my hammer can go over and overlap the edge of my anvil, the plane that my anvil makes. So I can forge that down to a pretty good point. Right? And so now you can see we're almost there. So I'm going to take one more heat to finish that out. And now one thing about that, I'm going to see if I can just change this angle a little bit so I don't squat quite so much. There we go. Okay. So now that I'm establishing that bevel down to that tip, I have a choice to make, because that depending if I have a sharp corner up top, or if I bring that way back, you can see that I'm forging it down almost on a 45. And I'm doing that very intentionally in order to give myself options moving forward if the way that for however I want that knife to look in the end. If I want to have a knife that looks kind of like this guy, you know, this has a long clip, so I'll be able to push that, that point that I am currently forging very blunt. I can push that back and create this nice long clip. Or if I want to have a blunt point, I can, I can just leave that very, at that 45 that I'm working at now. If you want to make a drop point, you keep you round this part out, and now it'll, you remove the kind of clip aspect of it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get the last of this forged here. So again, using the corners of your anvil are incredibly useful for the fact that they give you a whole other shape to work with, but also they denote the end of where there's material. So I can have my hammer face way off the corner of this anvil and start working, keep working that point. All right. So now, you can see that we're maintaining our thickness through here. Might swell a little bit, but not by very much. We have our flip point. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to flip this guy around and put the back end into the anvil. Now this is going to be forging out the handle. And so what we want to do now is create oh, there we go. Okay. That's going to, we're sectioning off the material that's going to become the handle and the material that's going to become the blade. So this is, at this point, you get to decide how much blade you're going to have and how much handle you're going to have. And you want to make sure you don't go too extreme in either direction because, you're making the choice right now. And what we're going to do in order to do that is we're going to hammer a shoulder in. So we're going to place the blade, the steel here, and hammer it down over this corner, driving this corner. Our hammer's going to be 50% on and 50% off the anvil. It's driving this corner up in and creating that section. So it's basically right there like that, right? So we're hammering this down and hammering that shoulder in. You go ahead and make that happen. Always want to make sure that you have your point down at this point so that you are, handle's going to face the right way. And so about, I don't know, right around here. So it's really important to get those first couple of hits nice and hard, and it creates that little shelf there. Now you have a reference point. So reference that back on the corner. Hit it again. Make sure that every time you swing your hammer, you have it nice and referenced. Because if you let that slide around, if you just have it here and hammer, 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 and it starts bouncing around, you're going to create all sorts of divots and dents that you don't want to have. So you've got to make sure that you're registered and you're continuing to put it in that same spot. Right? So you can see I've got it started, and put another heat here. And so I'm going to take another heat, and what we're going to do is just drive that up approximately halfway, like 40 to 50% into the bar. And then once I have that, I'm going to kind of relax the piece back so I can start drawing this part of the handle out. So we're driving it in here, and now we're going to kind of relax it out, draw this that corner out to the end of our handle. So go ahead and do that. All right. So drive that in a little deeper. All right. And now, like I said, we're just going to kind of roll this back and extend this line out to there. So slowly roll that back. All right. And now, again, you got to manage this material. Make sure that they're not down too wide on any of those flares. All right, and now one thing that we have here is when you look at it, you know, that's not nearly a long enough handle for my hand. But there's plenty of material in there. So what I'm going to do now, stop this in the fire. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the cross beam. And advantage of cross beam hammers is that you have the flat, which is going to, as you forge, it's going to expand everything in every direction, right? As you use the cross beam, it'll expand things in just the one direction. So when I'm hammering on it, I can make sure that I'm concentrating on drawing that material into length in the handle as opposed to length and width in the handle. So that's what we're going to do here. Get some length. All right. So I've drawn that out some. It's all lumpy, bumpy, and crazy looking right now. That's all right. Because now, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn around, take the flat of the hammer, smooth all that out. All the ridges that we've made are all in a direction that when we flatten them, they're also going to lengthen the handle. So hopefully, I had kind of estimated my forging correctly, and we'll have enough handle to make a comfortable grip. If not, we can always mess with it. All right, so now the flat. Thin this just a little bit here. Now, an important thing about bladesmithing, about blacksmithing, armoring, all this stuff, is trying to create nice, smooth surfaces, right? You want to make sure that you're not creating all of these big divots and dents. You want to make sure that you take the time to smooth things out and make them look good, right? One, it helps maximize the amount of material you have. Two, it's less work with grinders and files afterwards, if you're making it smooth. And three, it just gives you a better looking piece in the end. So it's like one of the things to strive for as you're working and as you're progressing with your work is to try to forge to a nice flat finish. Flat obviously being a relative term, but you always want to make sure that like you're trying to take every point that you're working and next time make it a little bit better. You know, I'm rarely actually happy with a lot like my work. I mean, it's good, and I'm happy with it, but I'm never satisfied. I guess is what I'm saying. And it's important to never be satisfied, to always kind of strive for that one bit better, right? So let's see here. So now what I'm going to do actually is, in order to get a little bit more length on my handle here, I'm going to come over the horn. Kind of not a great spot for you to see on the camera, but I'm just going to force it over the horn to give a little contour on the handle and also add a little bit of length. You got to be careful that when you pull it very gently at this point because you've already thinned things out. And when you're hammering down edgewise on it, you know, it just wants the taco on you. And you want to avoid the taco-ness. All right. All right, so now you can see, now we've got some contour on that handle. It is approximately the length of my hand, so that's going to work pretty well. In the end, I can always grind a little bit more out of this corner if I needed to lengthen it some more. So what we're going to do now, flip it around and start forging our blade. So you have the choices to make as to like what kind of blade shape we're going to do here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this clip back a little bit more, and then toss that in the fire here. So I'm going to do two things to that profile before I start putting in any sort of bevel. One is I'm going to bring that clip point back, and then the second is I'm going to I'm going to squeeze things down a little bit at the heel of my blade so that my blade flares out to that clip point and then comes down. It helps add a belly to the blade, which I think, which I find a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Also pushes a little bit more mass out towards the front and makes the blade a bit more choppy. All right, so we're going to bring this back a little bit, flatten that down. Again, using the edge of my anvil when I get towards the tip. Now manage that material. Now I'm just going to rock this back a little bit and forge that down. Flip it over and do some from the edgewise. Running out of here. All right. Now we got kind of like a funny looking shape, but that's all right. We flare out towards the tip, and honestly, having that forward curve, having that downward curve, is the thing that a lot of bladesmiths will put in intentionally in the beginning, so that when they go to put in that bevel and are stretching that edge material, when you have that downward curve, you know, as you stretch that edge material, that nose is going to rise, the tip is going to rise. So by having a little bit of forward curve in it to begin with, it mitigates some of that effect. So you don't then have to forge it back, you know, as it's up here. You don't have to do any edge forging and things like that. All right. So now I'm just going to go over the whole thing just a little bit, spin it down some, and then at this point we're going to do putting some distal taper, which is taper down towards the point on this axis. And so I'm going to start at the tip, I'm going to work my way back, going across the blade. On that. But what I do as I do that forging, what I like to think of it as a series of overlapping hammer blows, right? So you hit once here, and then you hit to the back and side, and then kind of going down the whole face of the blade. And what that does is it helps keep that smooth look that we were talking about, you're kind of striving for. You don't want to make a dent here, and a dent here, and a dent here. You want to make a dent, and then a dent that overlaps that dent, and then the same thing, so that way you're creating a smooth surface that is essentially at the bottom of all of those hammer blows. So we're going to do a little bit more of that distal taper. And I'm not going nuts hammering on it here, just enough. And you don't need to go all the way down the blade. I'm going to go back a little bit past that. And now you can see, I don't know if you can see it very well in the video, but I'm tapered down towards that tip. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to, now I kind of forged in that belly like we had talked about earlier. But one thing that I do need to make sure that I have is a decent heel on my knife. So you want to we're going to draw some material down here. And because if you don't have a heel, when your hand comes up, if this isn't tall enough, your fingers are going to start making contact with that blade. And that's kind of a thing that you really want to avoid. You don't want to cut yourself when you go to use your knife.
Hey, Jamie, we have a question.
Good safety tip.
Do you taper across? Yes. Do you taper across the spine of the knife?
Do I taper across the spine of the knife? Yes, I think that's if I'm understanding the question correctly, that's what that distal taper is. If you have the spine, you're coming down, coming down to a point when you're looking at the profile, like spine on. It should taper down to that point. That answer the question?
That did, yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw that heel down some, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my top seam to do that, and just take some material here and push it down. Making sure that I'm working both sides of the knife. You can also, so you can see I have this kind of, it has like a step here. I can come in and angle my cross seam to push material out there to make it a little bit more of a straight line. And so you can see now that material here that I've drawn down, right? And it's starting to make itself look like a knife here. So I've drawn that down. I'm going to go one more heat I'm going to split this heat. Part of it's going to be to draw that heel down a little bit more. And then from there, all that's left is the beveling, which can be tricky. So when you're beveling a knife, what I like to do is I like to count my hammer blows. So I'll hit 4 times on one side, flip it 4 times on the other. That way it helps keep your edge centered on the blade. Because it's easy to have it be forged out to one side or the other. Like I said, I like to count my hammer blows as I go ahead and do this. All right, so draw this out a little bit more. I'm just going to come a little bit more time, push some of that material down towards the edge. All right, and now we're going to start that beveling. So I'm going to hold the blade on a slight angle, and I'm going to strike off the angle. we're starting to get a pretty good knife shape here. Now, the other thing, this is another place where you can use the edge of your anvil. If I'm forging this knife and I want to forge this bevel in, I can lay lay the blade so the edge is not off the corner of my anvil, but at the corner of my anvil, and that way my hammer can overlap again, and I'm not in danger of hitting my anvil and making big old dents and dings and divots in the anvil or the hammer. Also a good tip for if you are just beginning this, start with like a hammer. You get a hammer from like Harbor Freight or something like that. And
yeah, Harbor Freight's got a great crossbeam hammer for about $6.
Yeah, so you take that hammer, remove the head off the handle, and soften the hammerhead, right? It's not going to, and what that's going to do is that now if you've gone out and spent a decent amount of money on an anvil, and you accidentally hit that anvil with that hammerhead, the hammerhead will deform as opposed to putting a big ding in your anvil. And so until you refine your hammer skills enough so that's not a danger, it's a great way to help preserve the face of your anvil.
That's a really good idea.
It's what we do to all the student hammers in the shop. They're all soft. So I'm just continuing to forge down this bevel. And so one thing you can do as you're doing that, as you make the forging down, if you see kind of ripples, forge to the spot where the bottom of one of those scallops. Because what that's going to be is a spot where material hasn't been pushed out, which means you haven't hammered there yet. Right? So now I'm just kind of finessing this down a little bit more. It's a little bit of refining I'm going to do to the shape, but we're pretty much there. Let's see here. So yeah, I'm just going to forge a little bit more out of this belly. I'm going to try to get this a little bit wider out of that belly there. And we probably just got one more piece here.
So, Jamie, you have about 12 minutes left, so you're good on time. Question that came up, what do you mean by softening the hammerhead?
Okay, so just heat it up in your forge, and then let it cool. And what that's doing is it's taking out any hardening. Once you bring, you start tempering, at 300 degrees, 350, and what that's doing is softening without getting too crazy technical, it's just softening the metal, right? So, you can either take it out and put it in, I would just put it in the forge, and let it come up to a dull red, and then set it aside and let it cool.
But don't quench it in water or anything, because it will be hardened.
Yes. Don't quench it. That's the key there. At this point, there might be a little bit of straightening to do, but this blade is, it's a basic knife. So when you just to make a straightening, as you go ahead and start to straighten stuff, look at it from all four angles, right? So by four angles, I mean from edge up, from the handle down to the tip, edge up from the tip down to the handle, and then spine up from the handle down and tip back. Because in a lot of those scenarios, you'll see something that, from one angle that you didn't see from another. And straightening can be incredibly finicky. So you want to make sure that as you're going ahead and doing that you're going slow. A dull red is better than throwing it in your forge and walking away and coming back and having to be, bright orange. A dull red is better because you want to move slowly. If you're straightening, you take a look, hit it twice, take a look, hit it twice, because probably that first hit was enough, and that second hit means that you need to flip to the other side to straighten it back, right? So you want to go nice and slow because it's easy to just go too far and then have to go back, and you go back and forth and back and forth. But yeah, that's basically it, and yeah. Now, a good thing to think about beyond, once you're at this point, and you get everything straightened, what you're going to want to do is normalize. And what normalizing is you want to, I'm just going to turn my forge off here because I'm done with the forging part. So when you normalize, what you want to do is you want to bring your steel up to, around, there we go. You want to bring the steel up to around 1475 and then let it cool down to a black heat. And then you do that like 2 or 3 times. And what that's doing is it's relaxing the crystalline structure inside the steel, and it means that you're getting out all the stressors that you put in by doing your forging. And if you let a piece sit at temperature for an extended period of time, like if you put your knife in the forge and you go to the bathroom and you come back and it's just blazing hot, what you're doing is you're getting grain growth. So the hotter that you keep the steel, the more that grain grows. And what that does is it makes your steel much more fragile, much more brittle. And is more susceptible to cracking and then breaking in the final stressors of the heat treat, right? Because heat treating is a fairly violent process.
Jamie, can you talk about heat treating, about the quench?
Yeah. So without going like too crazy into explanations, basically what you're doing is you're redistributing carbon in the crystalline matrix of the steel, and so you're once you bring your piece up to 1475 degrees is like the standard, right? You then get all of the carbon into solution. We actually have a heat treating graph here, right? So, so around 1400 degrees, you can see, ferrite austenite. And then what you want to do is when you quench it, it basically it realigns everything. It makes austenite, right? Or am I making sense? All right. Anyway, so the point is that what it does is it hardens things up to as hard as it's going to get. You got to drop below 900 degrees within a given range, depending on the types of alloys and whatnot in the steel. And so once you hit that 900 degrees, that hardening is happening. But the crazy part about it is it doesn't actually finish hardening until it drops down to around 300 degrees. So you have that window to kind of do some straightening if you quench and things are warped, you have kind of between that 900 degrees, which is a black heat, and 300 degrees. Once you hit that 300 degrees, all of that kind of locks in. Now that steel is as hard as it's going to be. So you need to be incredibly careful with it. It's easy to then like drop or something and have things break or cause fractures. And what you want to do is you want to get it into an oven, and I generally then temper for 2 to 3 hours at 375 degrees for my knives. Swords I temper out at more around 500 degrees because a sword it needs more flex than a knife is going to.
So Jamie, you have about 4 minutes left.
Okay.
And we have a question. What is best to quench with?
So I do a lot of my quenching with vegetable oil. It's easy to get. It is non-toxic. You can get Parks 50. You can get AAA quench oil. There's a bunch of different oils out there on the market that are very specifically designed, and certain steels want that. But mostly what you're looking for is, most of the qualities that you're looking for, a veggie oil is going to have, and you don't have to worry about, any of the kind of hazardousness of the other oils. Let's see here. So as back to the heat treat part, or I guess we're kind of still on that. There is an app that you can get that's just called, I think it's just called the Heat Treat app. I know, it's crazy, right? It's put out by the Heat Treat Society of the United States or whatever, and it's free, and it has like any type of steel pretty much that you can think of. It has all of the qualities, all the properties, all of the heat treating regiments, and all the information that you could want on there. So it's worth checking out. That's that. One thing that I was just going to mention as far as knife finishing goes is it's easy to if you have like an angle grinder, right? You definitely it's good to go ahead and take off material with that, and to make sure that you've removed the all of the oxides or whatever on the surface. But from there, doing draw filing is a great way to go to make a very nice flat surface. It's also a very period way to go. And so what draw filing is that so say I want to make this flat here. I take my file, and instead of going this way, you just make long strokes with it, and it'll cut that way. And it helps you create nice flat surfaces. And it takes a while, but I know several bladesmiths that's just the way that they do it, because it allows you the most amount of control.
Wow. All right. Well, I think we're almost at the 45-minute mark, so I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.